this week's program. We're going to be talking about a big range of things, including a very simple irrigation system. We're going to be talking about horticulture, and we're also going to be talking about a lot of other interesting subjects. But in just a moment, it's animal health, prevention and cure. We're looking at minimising drench use and also barber's pole.
Yes, barber's pole traditionally in this region, in the Canterbury region, hasn't been a major problem. It's a parasite or a worm involved in sheep farming, and the reason it hasn't been a major problem generally in Canterbury is because during the summer months there's actually very little moisture. But we get seasons such as this where we've had quite good number of spatterings of rain, and actually it's quite green around the place, so we get a bit of humidity, and so we have the minimum development temperatures being reached and the moisture needed for this parasite to develop. So it's called barber's pole worm because the adult worm looks like a barber's pole. It's got a red and brown little spiral inside it, which you can actually see, but it's a nasty little parasite. It's a bloodsucker, and so the result of its infestation is blood loss and anemia, and particularly in lambs and younger stock. So the result is dramatic anemia at times. So we can look into the conjunctiva or into the gums of these animals, and they're virtually white. They've been sucked dry nearly.
To that degree?
Yeah, absolutely. So it can be very, very serious. And of course, just like all of these diseases, when we've got those clinical scenarios showing their faces, what's happening under sort of the tip of the iceberg sort of thing, what's happening under the water, the sort of 3/4 of the iceberg under the water, what's happening to potential production before we get those obvious clinical signs is obvious. I mean, so these animals are losing lots of protein, which is having to be replaced, and that's protein which is not being diverted through for muscle or meat development. On top of the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood, when all these red blood cells are getting sucked out, we're also losing a lot of protein, and so sometimes these animals present with a classic bottle jaw. So the edema or the fluidy swelling under the jaw, or sometimes at the brisket, and that's because we've got fluid being lost out of these blood vessels and they're pooling with gravity. So yeah, weak anemic animals and any signs of bottle jaw, farmers should be on the lookout, because these are the conditions where we typically would see barber's pole. North Island farmers have lived with us for many more years. Yep. But because of these strange weather patterns that we're getting at the moment, I think it's definitely a risk factor that needs to be watched out for.
Okay, prevention and cure. I mean, does a normal drench fix it?
Normal drench does fix it. In the past, when we're targeting barber's pole, we can take advantage that it's a bloodsucker, and so we tend to advise the use of drugs, Closanto and things like that, which actually bind very firmly to the blood proteins, and so they don't leach out of the blood that readily, and so when the little blight is having its feed of a blood meal, it actually gets exposed to high levels of drug very quickly. It's a very pathogenic or a very severe disease causing parasite, much more so than the traditional worms that we deal with, and so I think it's a very pertinent piece of advice just to keep eyes open for it. And I know there was a problem a couple of years ago, particularly because same sort of environmental conditions happening.
So pasture management part of it?
Yeah, of course. I guess pasture management is the same as what we do for any of the nematode worm species, and that's involving things like making sure that your rotational grazing pattern is not too short, and that any opportunity to use cross grazing with other species or co-grazing with adult cohorts, they're all good pieces of advice which might minimise larval challenge. So if we can desiccate or kill lots of larvae and minimise what's being ingested, or get them mopped up and chewed up by more resistant more older resistant animals or other species which aren't affected, well then that's always very, very good advice.
And of course, selective drenching.
Selective drenching is very good. I mean, it's sort of on the back of this term I've used before called resilience rather than resistance, and so that might involve just selectively drenching animals that are obviously daggy. So animals that aren't seeming to show much effect from what potentially is quite a high parasite challenge, and there's no dags and they seem to be growing well, to leave them alone and only drenching the animals which are obviously affected, and that way we dilute any potential of drench resistance. We get this refugia scenario where we still get a number of parasites on the pasture that maintain susceptibility to the drenches we're using. So that's good pieces of advice there.
Well, it is very good pieces of advice. Thanks very much indeed, Nick. At Lincoln University, we often have a look at the dairy unit, which is just in Lincoln, but the university has a lot more farms. We'll find out more in just a moment. Lincoln University is also a massive farm.
Absolutely. Lincoln University's got a massive portfolio of farms, covers 5,000 hectares actually. So we're talking like across the country as well. So we go as far as Northland all the way down to Balclutha. So it's a remarkably large portfolio, absolutely.
You've got all sorts of range. You've got high country, low country, sheep and beef and dairying.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we, of the 5,000 hectares, we've tried to position ourselves in the sense that we've got representation within the North Island, within the South Island. So within the North Island, we've got obviously the partnership with St Peter's in Cambridge, so we've got a dairy farm there. Northland College is a training institute where Lincoln Telford participates in providing training at that property. We're in the process of, we've got another trust set up where a farm was provided to us in partnership, and it's a sheep and beef finishing property in the Manawatu, so that's in the process too. So that's the North Island component. So then when you head south, we've got, like you say, we've got land that goes from High Country Station at Mount Grand through to the dairy farms that we've got locally around the campus. So we do have the demonstration farm, the dairy demonstration farm, which is a well publicised property. We have a research dairy farm, but we are in the process of going through expansion and development of other farms that we have as well. So it's an exciting portfolio, it really is. So.
And you've got farms that are actually part of the campus.
Absolutely, so that's a really unique quality that Lincoln University has, is that we've got literally paddocks that are on campus, that the professors, the researchers, the students, they literally fall out of the offices and classrooms into their workspace. So there's like this there's this really nice buy-in that it's right there and it's so accessible, and they're very passionate about it, and it's well used and it's well loved. So yeah.
And a lot of it is research.
Yes, absolutely. So the land surrounding the campus is the majority of it is research, or within a teaching program, so that it assists with logistics, obviously, that we can get students and people there, and like I consider them, they're like laboratories, but just without roofs. So that's how we look at the land around campus. But then in the same breath, we jump across the road here and we've got the research dairy farm's literally across the road, and we've got other support land around it. We've got land that's leased out. We've got, when it comes to the Lincoln University portfolio, it's diverse. It's full of prosperity. There's so much happening, and it's my challenge to try and keep a track of what's happening where and who's doing what, and make sure it's all making a profit and it's all being done sustainably, and that I know I've got I know what's happening.
And does it have to make a profit?
Absolutely, absolutely. When it comes to research property, when you're looking at a research farm, the profit is derived from the research. So there are research targets that they have to achieve in order to receive the funding. But then that in itself, when you're put it across to some of the other farms, like if we separate the farms, we've got the likes of demonstration farms, which are effectively commercial farms. So we're demonstrating commercialism. So they have to show a profit in order for us to be able to demonstrate that this is how, this is a way that you can operate this particular package of land, and that's how that works. You've got the likes of training parcels of land. They're set up for training, and so education funding comes into that. So everything has to, it's a business, so everything has to make sense and it all has to come together. And profit is driven through the funding that you receive, or if it's not profit, it's profitable to the university in the sense that we're gaining exposure. We have students coming in and they're experiencing positive outcomes from their learnings on the farms. So then you've got the research farms, and we also have scholarship farms. So we have farms that have been bequeathed to us in the sense that they say run the property, profit that is derived from that is then provided as a scholarship for students to partake in education here at Lincoln University. So they too have to make a profit too. We've got to pay the students. We want them to have these scholarships.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
I've been reporting on farming matters on the radio and newspapers and on television for 40 or so years, but communication, like farming, has moved on. So we've come up with On the Land, online and through YouTube on any screen, anytime and anywhere. Just push play and see and hear what's happening today in our rural community. You'll learn and be informed about the latest and best information farming matters. On the Land, bringing farming information into the 21st century. So join us on our website, ontheland.co.nz.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
Phil, you've come up with an ideal system for small areas.
Absolutely, Rob. One of the things is when you've got a very small area, often you think, well, how do I do that? So what we've done is we've actually put together another DIY pack, but a single unit K-line.
So this is going to be used on lawns and that sort of area?
Yeah, absolutely. And what we've done is we've put a fully adjustable sprinkler in the pack, which means that we can actually set its arc from either a full circle, and we can go down to quite small arcs. So that, for instance, might mean you can set it up in a corner so that you can actually irrigate all of this area. And then you can move it to another area where you can change the angle and do something slightly different.
Let's have a look at what's in the box.
So we've provided 35 metres of tubing so that in fact in low pressure situations we can still get this to operate, or it's possible to in fact connect on the end of the pod a connection for the likes of a a garden hose with its Nilex type of fitting. So either choice, so either a garden hose or the pipe that it actually comes with. And then in here we have a part circle sprinkler that we can easily adjust the angle on. So that will only do 2/3 of an arc, for instance. And then we either connect that on the end there, and obviously that's got a washer, it just simply does up nice and tight, connect the garden hose on, or conversely the pipe actually already has its fittings on it. So you can see the nut and tail fitting that's already on the pipeline.
Simplicity is obviously the key.
Absolutely. And actually providing an opportunity for somebody to do all areas of their property. So whether they're doing hill areas or pivot corners with structured K-line irrigation system, or whether they're doing smaller areas with this, or other areas where they've got one of our 5-pod 1 hectare kits, we're providing solution right across the broad range.
This is going to totally open up your urban market.
Absolutely, and in fact in an urban sense there's already quite a lot of K-line used, and it's used in typically the likes of a subdivision where they're trying to get grass to grow after they've cut and carried and organised the slope of all of the land for a subdivision. They'll often start the grass with a K-line type system.
Because it's very gentle.
Very gentle rain. So if you asked a farmer, what sort of rainfall do you want? He's never going to say, thunderstorm thanks, because we know it's terribly inefficient. But if we apply water at a very low rate, the soil can absorb all of the moisture, and that's where we get the best outcome for the grass.
John, wool, how's the season been?
It's going along pretty well, Rob. We're obviously into the main supply period now, through January, February, March, and a bit into April. They're the big supply months, and the wool is coming along pretty well, especially in the North Island. In the South, it would be fair to say we haven't got a real handle on the actual supply quantities down here. There's certainly been a reduction on last year, and that goes back to the drought, stock being taken to
stock
the
numbers disappearing.
Stock numbers disappearing, capital stock, etc., etc. So through December, there was certainly limited supplies in the South Island. It's coming better now, but we still question the accuracy of people's forecasts and numbers from the South Island. North Island's different. They seem to be pretty up with the play there. I'm not sure if I told you last time, but we had an issue with China leading up to Christmas. They suspended quotas, which caused quite a few problems for everybody. But anyway, it's pleasing to say they're back on track now, and there's certainly been a lot of business done from late December onwards. Good. And a lot of that wool was shipped in January, and business has been placed for February and March as well. So China continues its role, but then saying that, everybody out there, other people have been placing good orders as well. So you've seen the market hold up very well, really, and given the state of the level of the New Zealand dollar, which is obviously a lot more favourable for exporters, and that includes everybody in the wool industry. You've seen cent returns to farmers that they're looking as good as any of them over the last sort of 2 or 3 years. So it's steady as she goes.
Good. The rain, would that confuse things? Because that holds up shearing, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It makes for more volatility from week to week, month to month, as far as roster quantities and wool coming forward. But it all evens out at the end of the day. If it led to cancellation of auctions or things like that, it would cause a bit of consternation, but it hasn't done that yet. And so we just carry on,
Exactly. Chinese New Year, does that slow things down a bit?
Definitely. The official day was yesterday, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, and what we usually find a week either side. things start to slow down and then they stop, and then it'll take another week before things start to sort of.
Do they really get into their?
Oh yeah, I mean, if you're in China, a lot of them go back to their hometowns, and in China that's a massive undertaking because of the volumes of people you're talking about. So generally, it can be even up to a 3-week holiday, even though the official holiday is only 1 week. For some, it can be 3 weeks by the time they get home.
They get there.
Do whatever they do.
Yeah, they party and celebrate.
Mao Tai and everything else. So the workers as such, I think you'll see a 3-week period. For the people in the more professional type jobs, it'll be shorter than that. But no, it's their biggest. It's like our Christmas. It's their biggest celebration of the year, and they do party, and good on them.
Absolutely. What's presentation been like?
Fine. We've actually, the colour in the South Island's held up very well to date. A lot of that has been the dryness, but of course we had all that rain. How long ago is it now? 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, 2 or 3 weeks.
5-day break. So you might see that change, but on the whole, presentation in both islands has been very good.
So you're going to get a bit of vegetable matter and mud and stuff.
But nothing, to date, nothing that we'd be overly concerned about.
Fine walls, how have they been going? Because that sort of quietly slips off the radar because it
does.
just quietly happens, doesn't it?
Well, it's very seasonal, of course, and at the moment, it's very quiet. Your merinos and half-breeds are largely off the market at this time of year, and they'll start to come back on, say, you'll see the first of them usually around May, June period, the half-breeds. But the merino season, really, you're talking, say, August, September through to December, if you like. So very seasonal. So really what you're talking about now, you're in the volume period for crossbreds, the traditional crossbred types, and finer crossbreds, and lamb's wool. Of course, there's short lamb's wool, and it gets a bit longer as it gets coarser. So you're in the throes of a big lamb production as well, and the lamb price has been excellent, and that's been on the back of Chinese demand. Yeah.
So what do they use that for?
Hand knitting yarns, face-to-face. It changes every year, but basically fabric. It goes into fabrics, which goes into clothing, which can go into face-to-face fabrics, fancy yarns, all sorts of things. And but we've found the last 2 years the demand has been very strong, and farmers have been getting a very good return for their lamb's wool.
That's good. Overall, is it becoming fashionable again to have wool?
I don't know about fashionable. I think wool's becoming more of a niche. I'd like to think that people are understanding that it's more of it's certainly a natural fibre. We've always said that, but I think people are beginning to appreciate more its qualities. I think you're finding that the architects and people like that in the chain that recommend carpets or recommend different in-use products to their customers are looking to wool's flammability attributes versus man-made fibres. Like wool is a lot less flammable.
You don't get an electric shock off metal things.
Well, and I think that's more, it's getting out there more, all these sort of things.
So we're quality, we're looking at the quality top level stuff.
Environmental things, flammability, repeatability. I think, you've got to put that against the oil-based fibres like polypropylene and nylon, which have never been cheaper to produce, quite frankly, for obvious reasons. And that makes it harder for wool, but wool's doing quite well. And I think it's surprised a lot of people, given what's happening in the world with what I've just talked about, how it's holding up in price. So that's a positive.
It is a positive, John. Thank you very much indeed. Straight after the break, we're going to be talking horticulture with Jim Grierson.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active Amino Acid Biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good. You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
And we've had a lot of rain, humidity, and now we're getting some sunshine. What's it like?
It's been a very difficult year, to be honest. I mean, season, let's say season, because it started back in December. Yeah, we needed the rain, and we got the rain, and we got the rain. We didn't need the rain. We still got the rain. So yeah, it was timing. It was very frustrating season, Rob. We had some nice fruit out there, and various right across a number of crops. Started off with the cherries. They got hammered with frost earlier on. Then a bit of hail came through, and then they ended up getting quite a bit of brown rot towards the end of their season. And the soft fruits such as strawberries, raspberries, very critical for the growers around Christmas period. That week before Christmas or 3 days before Christmas.
They farm all year for that, don't they?
And humidity was high, as you've said, and the fruit just didn't hold up. It was beautiful fruit, but it just did not hold up. So the people who bought it, some of them were a bit disappointed. They couldn't keep it in their fridge for 3 or 4 days. I mean, what they meant to do is buy it and eat it, but that's just unfortunate the way the season went. Even after going back through, after the hand picking goes on, they put machines through to clean up the fruit, go into jams and things like that. Even that was in big trouble. In fact, some of the growers just pulled out and said that's enough for the year. So it ended up being looking like a good year and ended up being a very, very below average year, I would suggest.
Yeah, so how bad are people going to get really hurt?
Probably, look, they're resilient. Yes, they'll get knocked around, especially the strawberry guys. They rely on a huge amount of income coming in through that sort of 5 to 6 week period, right through to now, really. And they've missed out on a big chunk of their income. So they're going to have to hold their breath for another year and put their head down and do it again. And they will do, because they're resilient people. But it's not very good for the growers. The black currants, they had a tough year with frost earlier on, and then the fruit looked good and it was coming in really well until that main rain which we got in the second week of January, and that was humid, hot. The fruit was coming in at about 20 degrees, which is really good for processing. What happened then? The temperatures went up, bricks went down, and the fruit started to deteriorate quite quickly. So we tried very hard, well the growers tried very hard to get as much crop off as they could. They were even harvesting in the rain to get it off. And of course when it leaves the farm in reasonably good nick.
Yeah,
but when we get up to Nelson where we processed it, it was a bit soupy. It was okay, we didn't lose too much fruit, but the quality certainly went backwards. So you had to dispose of some of the fruit that you would much rather keep. And of course, when you're looking at the likes of a Ribena brand, they have several varieties. So if you lose one quite dramatically, you have to adjust the blending. And of course, you can only adjust it to a certain point. Otherwise, you change the flavour and colour of the product. So there we were actually disposing of good fruit too, because we had no place to put it. So yeah, a bit of a dark year really. Robert, what it really does and what it really means now is there's a lot of infection out there in the crops post harvest. So what I mean by infection, I mean Alternaria, which for apples and some berry crops is black spot, Venturier diseases, and in the stone fruit, especially peaches and nectarines, but really got affected through that rain and that January period. And they have the Monia fructicoli, which is brown rot, and that's really quite bad. And they mummify the fruit on the trees, and you've got to get in and have a pretty strong spray program to minimise those spores, knock the spores
I
out.
suppose you can't do anything until the fruit comes off anyway.
No, you can't, but now we've got nectarines are clear. We're still in apricots down in central Otago. They're finding the same thing, a little bit of brown rot on them. Not so bad because the sugars weren't coming up. It's about, if the sugars are up high and the rain comes in with humidity, you'll get brown rot like you've never seen it. And that's what happened to the latter part of the peaches and nectarines, to a lesser degree the cherries. So what it means is the growers have got to put in a pretty strong program now of copper and add in calcium nitrate, which is a granular fertiliser actually, but yeah, it's very soluble. Put that in the spray tanks, and that breaks down the trash, in other words the mummified fruit and the leaves that have got these spores on, and breaks them down, and they minimise. They don't eliminate the spores, but they certainly minimise them by a huge amount. So the growers know that, and they're out there doing post-harvest sprays now.
And that black spot, is that what we get that in our roses, or is that?
Yes, that's the same family. That's the same family. That's an alternaria, and then we've also got a Microsporella, which is the one that goes into black currants and gooseberries. But they're all of the same family. They're cousins, and they all react the same way. So we've got to clean them up with the copper and the calcium nitrate also.
But your heart goes out to those guys. I mean, there's the one in Marshlands Road who normally does fruit. And I drove in there, and they said, "We're just doing pick your own because it's not worth us picking them."
No, it isn't. And unfortunately, I just live in Redwood, North Christchurch there, and 300 metres away from us, the Marshland growers start, and about 200 metres into them, so 500 metres away from where I live, they got devastated with hail. We never even got a blooming hailstone, and that's what hail does. It comes in strips. So a lot of the lettuce just around that Christmas time again. A lot of the lettuce, cabbage, green beans and all those things are there for Christmas, and peas, they got devastated out through that area too. So those guys didn't have much fun either. And they just plough them in. That's what you do. You just plough them in and replant, and away you go again. And of course Christmas only comes once a year.
It does.
So those top prices that those guys really do rely on to even out their year, we're bottomed out a little bit, or bottomed out about this year.
Has it affected exports much?
No, not really, because the only thing that was the exports affected was the cherries, which was a big cherry export. The other fruit is mainly consumed in New Zealand or is processed in New Zealand, so no, not too bad that way. And the apples, of course, are only just starting, although the fruit has been knocked around badly in badly in southern Hawke's Bay and in Rawaka, Motueka, Waimea Plains and Nelson. Those guys have had a huge amount of their fruit taken out with hail, so that will affect their export count. It'll increase the juice, which they don't get very much for at all, and so it goes on. And they can't do anything now until probably another 3 or 4 weeks' time when the harvest is over for them, or into March, and then they'll start those same programs to eliminate those diseases.
And Jim, the imported fruit is still causing tummy problems and outbreaks of not very nice things in tummies.
Yeah, I mean, dare I say it, if I was a housewife at home, I wouldn't even think of contemplating purchasing it, to be honest. I would look for New Zealand label. If we haven't got New Zealand fruit, there's other lots of good fruit and vegetables out there processed and grown in New Zealand that I would have complete faith with. As far as the berry fruit goes, it's a very hard thing to track where it really is coming from. We've got some good suspicions where it's coming from, but it's not doing the berry fruit industry, our berry fruit industry, any good either, because people have all of a sudden not buying berry fruit when they should be.
Well, they'll be scared witless.
No, absolutely, and only rightly so. But at the end of the day, look on the labels, see what the origin is. If it's New Zealand, even if it's Australia, it's fine. You can buy it you can purchase it with confidence.
Wouldn't you think that the supermarkets would stop buying anything that had a risk?
No.
That was a very short conversation, Jim Grayson.
Look, I mean, they're in the business to sell things, and they will be assured that their purchasing is correct, and they'll deceive a number of customers.
So look for the New Zealand label.
Look for the New Zealand origin label.
Jim, thank you very much indeed. In just a moment, we'll be talking to Kerry about rural women New Zealand type matters. Thanks, buddy. That was a love. Kerry, an old subject, but school buses. How are you getting on with that?
Yes, well, it's that time of year again, isn't it? You know, children are all back to school and the buses are
winging their ways around the countryside. Of course, reminding people about the speed limit being the 20 k's past the bus on both sides of the road. The trial with the flashing signs is slowly grinding its way along.
Nothing happens fast in this
No,
world of
it
politics.
doesn't, and it is frustrating. The first trial was done and was proved very successful with the large signs on the big buses. And NZTA, who need to approve that sign for use, were very happy with that, but they were concerned about the effectiveness of a sign on the smaller buses, because of course school buses can range right from the big coaches right down to something like a minivan and would need a much smaller sign. So NZTA were concerned that sign might not be as effective, so they've asked for another trial. So the prototype of that smaller sign has been designed and made, but NZTA have not yet approved it. So it's very frustrating, but it's hoped that trial will be underway by the middle of this year. And of course, Rural Women will be heavily involved in that. And to make sure that the results are as comparable as possible, they're going to do it again in mid-Canterbury, where the first trial was run. So we'll be quite involved in getting that underway. And hopefully then once they can see that the sign is effective, it still has good visibility and it works in slowing traffic down, hopefully then we'll be able to have those signs approved for use on the buses. But like all things with government agencies, very slow, long-winded, and really, so hard not to be disheartened and with the constant delays from government agencies. And the key thing here is, of course, the safety of thousands of children as they're going to and from school every day.
And you're talking about little kiddies.
Little 5-year-olds getting on those buses, and in some communities, those buses are also used for taking preschoolers. So there's little children right up to obviously the college students getting on those buses twice a day, and we're wanting to keep them as safe as possible. So we really hope the government agencies push this along quite quickly.
It'd be quite nice if they did.
Well, it would. And of course the ministry did have a working party in place to try and look at how they were going to roll out the new signs once they were approved in terms of timeframes and funding, of course, but that's now on hold, waiting for the signs to be finally approved. So the whole thing's very slow, but we are trying to keep pushing it along.
Communities would put their hand in their pockets, wouldn't they, for that sort of thing?
Yeah, certainly that is one of the models that was suggested, that there might be a shared funding arrangement between government and bus contractors and communities to try and make sure that they were on there as quickly as possible. And that, I think, is one of the models the ministry was certainly considering. Communities themselves just, yes, any time, as soon as they can do it, they will. They want these signs so much. And of course, it's not just the speed past the buses, there's also speed past the schools that we're trying to encourage motorists to slow down for as well.
Urban as well as rural.
Oh, urban as well. Many district councils have been very good at lowering the speed limits past schools and towns. But of course, it's the country schools that are struggling with, some of them are on state highways and you've got traffic whizzing past at 100 k's an hour and you've got children out there. It's just not safe.
No, it's not.
And
it's
we're wanting
Russian
to get
roulette.
that. We're trying to encourage that speed to be dropped down to about 70 k's past those schools on the main highways, just to try and make it that a little bit safer, and 40 k's in the town areas where traffic is travelling that bit slower anyway.
If somebody did cause a terrible accident, I mean, it's going to haunt them for the rest of their lives.
Oh, absolutely, and it's devastating, obviously, for that person and the family, but the whole community suffers as well. And we really want to try and avoid that and get people to slow down.
More drownings in the last weekend, and now there's a call for education about rips and rivers as well as learning to swim.
Absolutely, and that's really important because as we talked about last time, there's fewer school pools and people are swimming in more public areas like at the beaches and rivers and lakes and so on. And I think over time that people have lost the ability to recognise those dangerous spaces like the rips. They're not taking good care of what's under the water when they're diving in. It's all very well to dive off a bridge, but you need to know what's down there underneath, whether there's obstacles and, rocks, logs, all sorts of things at the bottom of lakes and rivers. And you need to be very, very careful and always make sure that you have other people with you so that you're not swimming alone and that there's help readily available if you need it.
But you're bulletproof when you're under 30.
Oh, of course, all children are, and it's very scary. And of course, at this time of year in the rural sector, we're seeing people out there in irrigation races and ponds, and that's really unsafe. Mainly because the ponds, they don't have a natural foreshore. It's a very steep, slippery side,
Yeah, it's very hard to get out of it, and once the pumps are working and that water's draining out of there, it's at a rate that people just can't swim again. So it's a dangerous place to be swimming, and I know it's very enticing, but I'd really advise against it because it's not safe.
And we've got to get that message across to them.
We do. We need to keep our people safe.
Kerry, thank you very much indeed for coming in, as always. After the break, we're going to be talking about food safety.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
I've been reporting on farming matters on the radio and newspapers and on television for 40 or so years, but communication, like farming, has moved on. So we've come up with On the Land, online and through YouTube on any screen, anytime and anywhere. Just push play and see and hear what's happening today in our rural community. You'll learn and be informed about the latest and best information farming matters. On the Land, bringing farming information into the 21st century. So join us on our website, ontheland.co.nz.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
Food safety, is that something that consumers don't worry too much about, but the industry does?
I think that both consumers and industry actually think quite heavily about food safety. At the end of the day, no one wants to eat something and get ill. I think from the New Zealand perspective, from the industry perspective, industry are very well aware of the importance in food safety, because at the end of the day, they can't sell food that is unsafe to eat. It's not good for business. So yes, it's vital.
So I guess we look at procedures as well as the end user?
I think that the sort of work that we do at Lincoln, and indeed that I've done in the past, actually involves pretty much the whole food chain. You can, it's important, I think, to try and consider hurdles at different levels to get the best possible effect.
Now, we're talking about bacteria, and my understanding is that that doesn't necessarily affect the host animal, but it does affect humans.
The problems don't manifest themselves in the host animal, that's for sure, for the most part. But it's when they hop into humans, most commonly through the ingestion of contaminated food or water, that's when the problems actually start, many of them. So if it adds another area of complexity to the whole issue. You're basically fighting against nature. They're quite natural in a host organism, in a host animal, but when they get into people, then it becomes they become problematic.
Do they change? So when you're fighting bacteria, do they actually sort of morph into something new?
They're very. I think one of the reasons that I'm so committed to microbiology is that they fascinate. Microbes are fascinating in terms of their adaptive capability. They can certainly adapt very quickly to environmental change. And if they don't adapt, then quite often new variants can simply overtake the population, and they become suddenly a problem organism.
So that's a sort of resistance.
You could say that. That certainly happens with some agents more than others. Antibiotic resistance is, of course, reasonably well known, and we've seen, not so much in New Zealand, but certainly internationally, we've seen a significant increase in the number of antibiotic-resistant bacteria right across the world, and that's been a big and increasing problem over many years.
We hear a lot about Campylobacter, and of course, especially during the barbecue season.
You do indeed. I guess Campylobacter is the most common bacterial cause of food poisoning throughout the world, in actual fact. Unfortunately, in New Zealand, we do have quite a high incidence of it. I think we're second highest on the table right now. We were first. We've had a significant reduction over the last few years. There's been some very good, noble efforts made by industry, and the regulators have done a good job too. Everyone's played their part, but I think it's still very high, and there's more work that needs to be done.
Is it after you bought it from the supermarket, or is it before it gets to the supermarket?
I don't know that you could focus on both. I think that the issues are in both. I mean, at the end of the day, the animals are being produced, and they harbour quite naturally Campylobacter as part of their normal bacterial flora. Obviously, the problems actually occur once the consumer has consumed the contaminated food. So it's actually at both ends of the food chain that the issues are.
We do get told to cook our chicken well.
Yep. That's what I do at home. Absolutely.
So the take-home message is for people to really cook their chicken well.
That's certainly one of them. I mean, the Ministry for Primary Industries have some very commonsensical guidelines on their website, and you know, they're very prudent. One of the things that I think people don't realise about Campylobacter is that, you know, you can cook it as much as you like, but if you've prepared it on a particular surface and that surface hasn't been washed or decontaminated in any way, that can actually act as a reservoir for contaminating other things. And we believe, just because of the quite small numbers of bacterial cells that you need to become ill, we think that cross-contamination is actually quite a significant problem in terms of the incidence of Campylobacteriosis in the home.
So be scared and careful?
Not necessarily. I think be careful rather than be scared. If you're careful and you prepare things appropriately and they're cooked properly, cooked bacteria, dead bacteria don't cause the problems, live ones do.
John, aches and pains may be more sinister than just sort of feeling a bit sore and fluey.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's the interim. I mean, sinister sounds like this could kill you. And as I said to you earlier on the chat about fibromyalgia, nobody dies from it. A lot of people feel like they are. But it's, I would say just anecdotally, it seems to be at a minimum on the staying the same, but probably on the increase. And what it is it's inflammation of the connective tissues of the bodies. And given that, you know, connective holds things together, you can reasonably assume they're pretty much everywhere, right? Particularly the muscles seem to ache, right? And we do find that there are blood changes. People show an increase in what's called ANA, anti-nuclear antibodies. So there is a biochemistry behind it. But what I'm interested in, and it's just sort of a little bit of reading I've done and what I've noticed myself, is that it invariably exists in that context of stress. Quite often when stress suddenly disappears, fibromyalgia kicks in. So, you know.
And so the symptom is like a bad flu, but it just doesn't go away.
Yes, yeah. The fatigue is not so much a feeling, and it's not so much in the joints. It's every muscle aches, and so movement can be quite painful. And so the person finds that what used to be something they could do quite easily now is actually a real effort and quite painful. And the treatment for it, I mean, this is why I talk about stress, is that the main gland in our body that deals with stress, well, there's two of them, are the adrenal glands, ad, meaning to, towards, or above in Latin, renal, kidneys, so they sit just here on top of your kidneys, right? And they've got two components, a medullary and cortical component, and the cortical component makes cortisone, hence it's called cortisone from the cortex, right? And cortisone's the body's natural anti-inflammatory.
And if we get under a tremendous amount of stress for a long period of time, we're actually straining that gland quite a bit. And my feeling is that as much as anything else, fibromyalgia is a failure of appropriate cortisone control.
So drug use to get it right?
I like to see patients before they've gone on prednisone, which is the artificial cortisol they put you on to take the pain levels down. And look, some people are so crippled by this that cortisol is the only thing that gets them out of bed in the morning. The difficulty is there's this funny little feedback loop. You give someone cortisone, right, and a little part in the brain that sends a signal to the adrenal glands to get bigger to make cortisone goes, no need for that, plenty of cortisone around. So adrenocorticotrophic hormone, trophic meaning growth, diminishes, and so the person stops producing their own cortisol. And so if you're on cortisone for a long time, then the adrenal glands shrink, or the cortex does, and you stop producing cortisone, and then when you need it, you can't make it. So the big issue is not so much that prednisone creates problems, although it can, it's that getting off it is an absolute bloody nightmare. It's a year. You've been on it for a good while.
That prednisone is something which is, well, all sorts of bylines.
Anywhere where there's inflammatory processes that are getting out of control that represent a potential risk for the body, prednisone seems to be the drug of choice. So you'll also see it, say, for instance, in an acute asthmatic event where the person's really in crisis. And don't get me wrong, stopping breathing's really bad.
Yeah,
so
not
cortisone's a good idea. If the person's on it for a long time, though, you do get the secondary effect of the adrenal glands shrinking. Now, we look at it and say, there'll be other factors. It's one of these mosaic problems, a picture made up of many pebbles, right? And so rather than looking at, okay, how do we suppress this immune response, which is causing the problem, ask the question, where perhaps might this immune response be coming from? And number one for me is chronic long-term stress. But the second one that I find really important is food intolerances.
Food?
Food intolerances, yep.
Yep.
And the two biggie are usually, hate to say it, gluten and dairy. And the third one's probably soy. Potato farmers are happy with me. Yeah. Not everyone's angry at me, Rob.
No.
And meat and beef, doing well. And
absolutely.
So they should be, because they don't seem to have any impact on... it's very unusual to get a meat intolerance.
No, well, exactly. But, let's talk a wee bit about gluten, because there seems to be an epidemic.
I don't know. Look, is it that we're just seeing and picking it up now and we didn't before? Is it a fad? Or is there a real problem? I think the latter. I would see a lot more of it now than I have, say, 10 years ago. And I was listening to the Greens on...
The Greens.
Yeah, I know, that makes you happy. I was listening to the Greens on the radio this morning, and they were talking about value added in dairy. And they were saying that the raw... what do you call it? The dry milk powder price for organic dairy is 10 times what it is for standard stuff, right? So there may be lots of benefits in for us looking at reducing the chemical inputs into farming, because something is changing the deal, whether it's changing the genetics in the plants, whether it's changing the way we're harvesting, storing and utilising.
Or preservatives.
Or adding preservatives, or are we putting chemicals into the process of getting the output. Incredibly complex stuff, though, isn't it? I mean, some cockie's bought a bit of land and he's up to here with the bank manager going, "You're my best friend." You can only see this hand, not this one. And he's going, "I've got to get this out of the land, or I'm shot." So big stuff. Requires governments with big thoughts.
Exactly.
Wide thinking.
So it comes really back to stress and managing stress, and it's recognising it and getting an expert to do something.
And intervene. If you've got these aches and pains all over your body, then intervene early rather than late. Because once they come and see me and go, "I've got fibromyalgia, I've been on prednisone now for 3 months."
They won't say that because no one can pronounce it apart from you.
I've got this terrible achy body thing, and they stuck me on this pill. I go, yeah. So I see that, and in my mind I go, and I'm thinking, bugger. Because it's just that little bit harder, because we've there got to find the underlying triggers, and then we also then have to advise them on how they chat to their doctor to get weaned off the prednisone. I can't say anything about going off prednisone.
John, thank you very much indeed. If you want to have another look or listen to John's interview, you can go to our website, which is ontheland.co.nz. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you've just missed the program, but I will be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.